One of the programs that I've loved watching during this lockdown period is one where family heirlooms, articles, things that have been precious to people, connecting them with their past, is taken into the restoration shop. Because the articles have become damaged, frail and fragile as the years have unfolded, and they're no longer fit for purpose. They're still precious, but they're not fit for purpose at all. And the wonder is that in the hands of gifted and skilled restorers, they're literally brought back to life. And so they're returned in a way that they can be used again. The sheer beauty of them can be seen in great depth. Listen to what the writer of the book of Lamentations says in the 5th chapter and the 21st verse. He says this: "Restore us, O Lord, and bring us back to you again. Give us back the joy we once had." And so I want to talk to you this morning about restoring grace, recognizing that sometimes it is that life's experiences, the things that just happen to us as we journey in faith, maybe sometimes it is just the sheer length of time that we've been on a journey, can leave us a little bit weary and worn. That first joy that we had when we first came to know Jesus, when it was that we first learnt to worship and to learn from him, has just become, well, a little tarnished as the years have unfolded. And I want to talk to us about how it is that God can restore that back within our hearts and our lives. But first, I think we need to take a little time just to look at one of what some of the telltale signs might be of when it is that our faith is becoming, to lose its shine, is becoming a little bit tarnished, one might say. Mark's gospel, of course, includes the wonderful story of Peter and his experience and relationship with Jesus. And around Mark 14 and 15 is the story that focuses on Peter's denial of Christ. 3 times in the courtyard, he said, "I don't know him, I don't speak like him, I don't come from the same area that he came." And that denial lodged deep within his heart. And yet, when it is that we compare that with what it is that Peter says in verse 29 of the 14th chapter, he says this: "Everyone else may stumble in their faith, but not I, Lord. I will not." I think one of the first telltale signs that we're in danger of our faith sort of losing its tarnish and edge is when we become overconfident in what we can do. We can forget how vulnerable, how easy it is for us just to fit into the old way and the old pattern of doing things, that we forget that God's grace is a gift to us to enable us to be much more than who we can be by our natural inclinations. And so there can sometimes be that overconfidence in what we can accomplish and what we can do. And I want to say it's the thin end of the wedge that sometimes can draw us away from that first love. The reality is we become more in love with ourselves than we do with Jesus. The second area is an area of laziness that can sometimes just kick in, particularly for those of us that have been on the Christian path for a long while in the journey. We become complacent with things. We sort of take things for granted. We no longer see the sheer wonder of what it is to be in fellowship with Jesus. Verse 37 of that 14th chapter, it is that Jesus, of course, has gone off into the Garden of Gethsemane to spend some time in prayer, and he asked Peter and 1 or 2 others just to stay awake for a little while, to be his support, to be the ones that are there, sort of just helping him through the darkest hour. And when he comes back from his prayer vigil, he discovers that they're asleep. And so it is in verse 37, he says to Peter, "Couldn't you stay awake for just an hour to be with me?" That sense of laziness, of not wanting to put ourselves out, so often kicks in. Sometimes I will refer to myself as a brass player. Now, the reality is, can I play a brass instrument? Yes. There's a deeper reality that says I can't play a brass instrument today as well as I could do 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And that's nothing to do with my age. It's everything to do with the fact that I don't practice, I don't rehearse enough. So on the occasions that I do get my trombone out and sit with a group of other brass players, I guess after about 15, 20 minutes, my lips gone, my embouchures won't function anymore. My arms get tired. I don't have the capacity to play. I'm nowhere near as good a player as I used to be. Do I still love playing? Absolutely. But I've become lazy. And so the gifts and the talents have become diminished within me. That can happen with our Christian faith at times too. We become complacent about daily routine of prayer, of study, of sharing our faith journey with those around us, to make comparisons, not whether I'm better or worse than somebody else, but to share my experience, to see if they have something that resonates in my own heart that I can draw from and learn from. And the third element that we come is that actually Peter experienced something of the fear of disapproval. He began to worry, not about what Jesus would think, but about what other people would think. So in Mark chapter 15 and verse 54, it says that Peter followed him at a distance. All these things were afraid that others might reject us, that they won't accept us, that they'll make fun of us, or people will ridicule us in some way, or put us down, that we might be harassed because of what we believe and what we've experienced. And that's what had happened to Peter. He had seen the other soldiers, the other people that sat round the fire. He wanted to travel to Calvary, but he didn't want to get too close to Jesus in case it is that other people disapproved of him. And all those sorts of experiences, I think, are some telltale points about when it is that we're losing our first love, when it is that in some way we're not the follower of Jesus that we once used to be. And I think there's a pattern that we see in the life of Peter, the overconfidence, the letting of our guard down. What is it that he writes himself in his letter? He says, the devil prowls around like a lion, ready to devour us. There is that sense of sometimes I have a fear of what others might think of me, that it's more important than the way I express my love to God. I love that Wesleyan phrase that comes in that lovely song, Love Divine or Love's Excelling, that says at the end, lost in wonder, love and praise. Oh, I yearn that for me and for many others too, we'd rediscover that joy that we once had. You know, God doesn't say, if you love me, if you're good, or if you're perfect, or whatever. He doesn't say, I love you because of what you do. He says, I love you because I can't do any other. And here's the word of restoring grace. Some of us just need to write that down somewhere, that God doesn't stop loving us because we fail him. God doesn't stop loving us because we pull away from him. God doesn't stop loving us because in some way we fear what other people might say about us. God will never stop loving me because I am the recipient of his grace. Back to the book of Lamentations, the 3rd chapter and the 22nd verse says this: God's compassion never ends. It is only his mercies that have kept us from complete destruction. The psalmist David, after he had committed adultery, after he, in many ways, the action of his life, had denied his relationship with God. In Psalm 51, he prays this prayer, restore to me again the joy of your salvation. Notice that David didn't have to say or didn't have to pray to God, restore to me my salvation. His prayer was, Restore to me the joy of my salvation. And I guess for some of us too, we need to make that our prayer. Oh God, by your restoring grace, restore that first love in me. Restore that joy, that sense of wonder, that sense of bewilderment that I'm known as a child of God. Here's a prayer. Jesus, you know I've wandered away from you. My heart has started growing cold. My level of love and commitment to you is not what like it used to be. But I want to thank you for your unconditional love. I want to thank you that you've never stopped loving me. It's almost too good to be true, but it is a truth. Jesus, thank you that you understand and sympathize with my human weaknesses. And I want to thank you that you don't bear grudges. You're not angry with me. And I want to ask that by your grace, that you would restore to me the joy of my salvation, that I can come back to your open, loving arms. I want to follow you in a new and a fresh way. Our music for reflection this morning is sung to you by my cousin's cousin, so a vague link to the family, and his daughter. It's the beautiful words of the prayer. Let me read to you the concluding words that say this. Let this be our prayer. Lead us to a place, guide us with your grace, and give us faith, so we'll be safe. And I pray that you'll be both restored, renewed, and refreshed as you listen to this piece of music.
I pray you'll be our eyes and watch us where we go, and help us to be wise in times when we don't know. Let this be our prayer when we lose our way. Lead us to a place, guide us with your grace, to a place where we'll be safe.
La luce che tu
I
dai
pray we'll find your
nel cuore
light
resterà.
and hold it in our heart.
Ricordaci
When
che
stars go out each
torna
night,
stella sei nelle
oh,
mie preghiere.
let this be our
Quanta
prayer
fede c'è
when shadows fill our day.
Lead us to a place,
Guide us with your grace, give us faith so we'll be safe.
sogniamo un mondo senza più violenza, un mondo di giustizia e di speranza. Ognuno di la mano sopra ci
and watch us from above.
Miło trawiamo,
We hope each soul will find
intorno entro sé.
another soul to love.
Let this be our prayer,
Let this be our prayer.
just like every child.
Just like every child.
Need to find a place. Guide us with your grace. Give us faith so we'll be saved. Hela pedeke, haya chesa.